Save my sister, and I'll tell you what happened to your son, the street girl said to the millionaire. If this story interested you, subscribe to our channel and let us know which city you're watching from. Let's begin. Robert Monroe was known as one of the most influential entrepreneurs in San Francisco. The owner of a tech empire specializing in renewable energy and the heir to one of the most traditional families in the Bay Area capital, he had built his fortune by combining strategic vision with an unwavering discipline that few dared to confront. The beauty of the San Francisco Bay, visible from the windows of his penthouse in Pacific Heights, contrasted with the emptiness that had inhabited his heart for 2 years. The tragedy that confined him to a wheelchair had also extinguished the last spark of hope he still carried. The disappearance of his son Matt, only 6 years old, which occurred just days before the accident that left him paraplegic, was never fully explained. The police closed the case after months of fruitless searches. The press quickly found new scandals, and everyone around him, from family members to his own doctors, insisted that he needed to move on. But Robert never could. The absence of the boy with curious eyes and an easy smile had become a permanent void, a hole that no business success could ever fill. On the most difficult nights, when the silence of his penthouse became unbearable, he would revisit his son's room, preserved exactly as it was on the day Matt disappeared, the plastic dinosaurs arranged by size, the illuminated globe that projected stars onto the ceiling, and the small wooden boat they had built together. That Friday night, like so many others, Robert was dining alone at his reserved table at the Kraken's Table restaurant in the Mission District. The ritual repeated itself religiously, the same red wine, the same cod dish, the same faces around him fulfilling social functions that no longer held any meaning. The maître d' kept a respectful distance. He had learned after so long that the powerful entrepreneur preferred solitude to forced company. It was then that something broke the monotony of the atmosphere. A desperately poor-looking girl burst into the restaurant, drawing attention not only for her simple, worn-out clothes, but for what she carried in her arms, a smaller child visibly unwell. The murmurs of the patrons soon turned into muffled exclamations of surprise and discomfort. The security guard moved quickly toward the entrance, while the manager rushed to the door with a panicked expression on his face. Before they could reach her, the girl advanced purposefully between the tables, as if she knew exactly who she was looking for. Her eyes, fixed on Robert, conveyed something rare, an urgency that did not plead for pity but demanded to be heard. She ignored the looks of disapproval, the expressions of disgust, the malicious comments. The girl stopped before him, trembling, holding the child in her arms with the strength of desperation. The security guard was approaching rapidly, but it was the girl's firm, clear voice that froze everything around them. Without asking, without pleading, without crying, she simply said, "Save my sister, and I'll tell you what happened to your son." Robert felt as if time had stopped. The sentence, absurd and impossible, struck him like a bolt of lightning. How could this girl know about Matt, when the media had long forgotten the story? How could she know something so intimate and painful if she wasn't somehow connected to the disappearance? "Mr. Monroe, would you like me to remove these intruders?" asked the security guard, already grabbing the girl's arm. With a firm gesture, Robert ordered the man to release her. He saw the smaller child's half-open eyes, her irregular breathing, her pale skin with reddish patches. Moved by an impulse he himself did not understand, he commanded, "Call my driver immediately. We are going to St. Luke's Medical Center." "But sir, now," Robert cut him off, with the authority of one who tolerated no questions. Turning to the girl, he asked, "What's your name?" "Lyra," she replied without looking away. "And this is my sister Annie." In the luxurious car speeding through the streets of San Francisco, Robert watched the two of them. Lyra couldn't have been more than 12, and although her clothes were worn and her hair was disheveled, there was a dignity in her posture that was impressive. Little Annie, on the other hand, was burning with fever in her sister's arms, murmuring incoherent words. "How do you know about my son?" Robert asked, controlling his voice so as not to frighten the girl. "After you saved my sister," Lyra replied, with disconcerting maturity. "I promise I'll tell you everything I know." At St. Luke's Medical Center, one of the best-equipped hospitals in the city, Robert Monroe's arrival caused an immediate commotion. The director, Dr. Paul Evans, came personally to receive him, expressing surprise at the sight of the two children. "I want the best team taking care of this girl. Consider all expenses my responsibility with no limits," Robert ordered, as Annie was quickly taken for tests. The diagnosis didn't take long: severe pneumonia, severe malnutrition, and signs of a widespread infection. The medical team began treatment immediately, placing her under intensive care. Lyra refused to leave her sister's side, remaining there for hours without rest, holding her small hand with determination. During the long wait, Robert observed the two sisters through the glass, intrigued not only by the story Lyra had promised to tell, but by something unsettling he was beginning to notice. Whenever Lyra held Annie's hand, the little girl seemed to calm down instantly. Her eyelids, previously fluttering, would relax. Her skin, once pale, would gain a healthier color. Her breathing, once irregular, would become more steady. It was subtle, but impossible for someone as observant as Robert to ignore. When the doctors finally left the room, Dr. Evans approached with a confused expression. "It's strange. Mr. Monroe, the girl is responding to treatment much faster than we expected, almost as if," he hesitated, "well, as if some extra force were aiding her recovery." In the following days, while Annie recovered in the hospital, Robert arranged for Lyra to stay at his own residence. Initially, his housekeeper, Mrs. Gable, expressed concern. "You know nothing about this girl, Mr. Monroe. She could be involved with dangerous people. It could be a setup. She knows something about Matt," he replied simply. And that ended any discussion. Although he was reluctant to open his home, something about Lyra completely disarmed him. She was firm in her words, but never arrogant, polite but without submission or fear. When she spoke, she looked directly into Robert's eyes, as few adults dared to do. As a routine was established, with daily visits to the hospital, strange things began to happen. Annie, who was improving every day, showed an unusual attachment to Robert, despite having spent so little time with him. In moments of fever, she would murmur disconnected phrases like, "the boy who loves boats," or "Daddy is close." Initially, Robert interpreted these phrases as childish delusions caused by medication, until one afternoon, upon returning to the hospital after a brief business meeting, he found Lyra holding a drawing made by Annie during her session with the child psychologist. In the colorful drawing, there was a male figure in a wheelchair, a smiling child holding a small wooden boat, and what appeared to be the sea in the background. The figure in the wheelchair was undeniably Robert, and the boy, though drawn with the simplicity of a child, had the unmistakable features of Matt. "How?" Robert began to ask, his voice failing. "Annie has always had dreams," Lyra explained cautiously. "Dreams about people she's never met, places she's never been. And you? Are you going to keep your promise now?" Robert asked, feeling his heart race. "Are you going to tell me what you know about my son?" Lyra looked at her sister, who was sleeping peacefully in the hospital bed, and then at the busy hospital corridor. "Not here," she said. "Too many people listening. And some people can't know we're talking about this." That night, back in the penthouse, while Annie remained under observation at the hospital, Robert found Lyra contemplating the sea from the balcony. The moonlight reflected on the young face that, at that moment, seemed to carry the weight of the world on its shoulders. "I can't wait any longer, Lyra," he said, moving his wheelchair closer. "I need to know what you know about Matt." Lyra took a deep breath as if gathering courage. "Your son is alive," she said finally. "I saw him 6 months ago, in a large house in the countryside of Northern California. He was different, thinner, his hair was longer. But it was him, I'm sure of it." Robert felt the air escape his lungs. Alive. Matt was alive. The hope he had buried so long ago now exploded within him like a supernova. "How can you be sure?" "How do you know him?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Because I was there too," Lyra replied, her eyes filling with tears for the first time since she had appeared. "In the same house. We were like experiments for them." "Experiments? What are you talking about?" Robert moved closer, feeling a mix of hope and horror. "Some of us are born different," she continued, choosing her words carefully. "Some children are born with gifts that most people don't understand. Your son is one of those children, just like me and Annie." To prove her point, Lyra approached a withered plant that adorned the balcony. She placed her hands around the pot without touching it and closed her eyes. Slowly, before Robert's incredulous eyes, the leaves began to rise, gaining vigor and color. "Annie can see things far away, people she's never met," Lyra explained. "I can heal, transfer life energy. Your son can move objects with his mind. Small objects at first, but they believe he can develop something much bigger." "They who?" Robert asked, trying to process the surreal revelation. "A group of powerful people, scientists, businessmen. They call us the Talents Project." Lyra hesitated. "And one of them works for you." Robert's mind was spinning, trying to connect the dots. The hope of finding Matt was now mixed with the discovery of a world he had never imagined existed. A world where children possessed extraordinary gifts, where his own son was part of something that defied common understanding. And worse, a traitor close to him was involved. That same night, while Lyra finally succumbed to exhaustion in one of the guest rooms, Robert, seized by a mixture of skepticism and hope, began his own investigation. Using his contacts and virtually limitless resources, he started to piece together the impossible puzzle. He discreetly hired a team of private investigators led by Jacob Nash, a respected former police officer in California. He reopened contacts with trusted journalists, recovered archived security footage, and scheduled meetings with former employees. His attention turned especially to Ivan Croft, the chief financial officer, who had been dismissed from the company months after Robert's accident. Something about the man's sudden departure had always seemed suspicious, but at the time, consumed by the pain of his loss and adapting to his new physical condition, Robert hadn't questioned it deeply. Now, investigating the company's old financial records, an alarming coincidence caught his attention: significant transfers to a foundation called New Horizons, supposedly dedicated to children's shelters. The same foundation had connections to companies involved in international child relocation, a euphemism for international adoption under questionable conditions. The same Ivan, Robert remembered with a chill, had been the one to suggest hiring Fiona, the nanny who was taking care of Matt the week he disappeared. A woman who, coincidentally, vanished shortly after the incident, claiming urgent family matters. As he delved into this web of connections, Robert also observed the changes in his home. Annie, after a week in the hospital, was discharged and joined them in the penthouse. The girl's recovery had surprised even the most experienced doctors. "I've never seen anything like it," Dr. Evans commented upon releasing the little girl. "It's as if she has an accelerated regeneration capacity. Fascinating from a medical standpoint." What the doctor didn't know, but Robert now understood, was Lyra's role in this miraculous recovery. Every night, when she thought no one was watching, the older girl would sit beside her sister, hold her hands, and an almost imperceptible glow would pass between them. The next morning, Lyra would appear with deep dark circles under her eyes and a worrying pallor, while Annie was increasingly vigorous. The healing worked, but it came at a cost, and that cost was always paid by Lyra. One night, unable to ignore the girl's increasingly weakened state, Robert confronted her. "You're destroying yourself to heal your sister, aren't you?" Lyra, surprised by the entrepreneur's perceptiveness, simply nodded. "Why didn't you tell me about this?" he asked, genuinely concerned. "Because it's my responsibility," she answered simply. "Annie only has me in this world. It's always been this way." The revelation broke Robert's heart. 2 children alone against the world, one sacrificing herself for the other, while he, with all his resources, had spent years wallowing in self-pity. "You're not alone anymore," he said, holding the girl's hand firmly. "I'm going to help both of you, and together we will find Matt." What Robert didn't expect was that on the same night he made that promise, an envelope would be delivered to his penthouse. No return address, no identifying marks. Inside, only a recent photograph of Matt, looking healthy but with sad eyes, and a handwritten note: "Stop looking or you will lose him forever." At that moment, Robert knew the search would be even more dangerous than he had imagined. But he also knew with a certainty he hadn't felt in years that he was finally on the right path to finding his son. The veiled threat contained in that photograph provoked a reaction in Robert that surprised even Jacob Nash, the hired investigator. Instead of backing down, the entrepreneur intensified the search. Now with a precise focus, the New Horizons Foundation and its main financier, Ivan Croft. Everything points to a complex operation, Jacob explained, spreading documents across the penthouse dining table. The foundation exists legally, but its activities are nebulous. Officially, it helps needy children in vulnerable situations. In practice, it seems to select some of them for a special talent development program. Exactly as Lyra described, Robert murmured, examining the financial reports obtained through his contacts. And even was embezzling money from my company to finance this. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. While Jacob and his team tracked rural properties associated with the foundation in the Sonoma County region, Robert focused on gathering evidence against Ivan. In parallel, life in the Pacific Heights penthouse took on a new dynamic. Annie, completely recovered, charmed everyone with her energy and perceptiveness. Mrs. Gable, initially reluctant to welcome the girls, now surrounded them with motherly care, teaching them to bake cookies and telling them tales of the old city from before the great earthquake. Lyra, for her part, began a peculiar relationship with Robert. On nights when the entrepreneur suffered from phantom pains in his paralyzed legs, she would silently enter his room and place her hands on his knees. The warmth that emanated from that touch was followed by immediate relief, and gradually by something even more surprising, faint, almost imperceptible sensations returning to his long, dormant limbs. "What are you doing to me?" Robert asked one night, when for the first time in 2 years he managed to slightly move one of his toes. "The same thing I do for Annie," Lyra replied, with a tired smile. "I'm reawakening what's sleeping inside you. Can you heal me completely?" The question escaped before he could contain it, filled with a long-forgotten hope. The girl's face darkened. "Maybe, but every healing has a price. And the greater the damage, the greater the price to be paid." "By you," Robert concluded, finally understanding the girl's growing pallor, the deep dark circles, the exhaustion that seemed to consume her after each session. Lyra just nodded. "That's why they were looking for us. Children like me, like Annie, like your son. Our gifts are valuable to people who don't care about the human cost." It was at this moment that Robert faced his first major moral dilemma: continue the recovery sessions, which were returning not only physical sensations, but also the hope of walking again, or stop them to preserve the health of the girl who, inexplicably, had become so important in his life. The decision came in the form of a compromise. The sessions would continue, but limited and supervised by Dr. Evans, who was now part of the small circle of trust. The doctor, after overcoming his initial shock at the demonstration of Lyra's gift, developed a protocol to monitor the girl's vital signs, stopping the session at the slightest sign of excessive fatigue. "It's fascinating from a scientific point of view," he commented during one of the monitored sessions. "There's a real transfer of bioelectric energy, as if she can redirect her own life force to regenerate damaged tissue." "It's not science," Lyra corrected gently. "It's a gift. My grandmother had it, my mother had it, and now Annie is starting to show signs too." "Your family, where are they?" Robert asked, realizing he had never questioned the girl's past. Lyra's silence was more eloquent than any answer. Finally, in a controlled voice, she explained, "We lost our mother 3 years ago. After that, we were taken to a shelter in Petaluma. That's where they found us, the men from the foundation. They promised education, food, a better future. They took several children that day, but they only wanted the special ones." Annie, who had been playing quietly in a corner of the room, approached upon hearing the conversation. "The place of sad children," she said with a seriousness that didn't match her 5 years. "Where the boy with the boat cried every night." Robert felt a chill run down his spine. "Matt, they separated us by talents," Lyra continued. "They tested, measured, experimented. Some were kind, others—" She visibly shivered. "Others didn't care if we felt pain." The anger Robert felt at that moment was unlike anything he had ever experienced. It wasn't the explosive fury from when he learned of Matt's disappearance, nor the helpless frustration during the months of fruitless police investigation. It was a cold, calculating, determined rage, the same that had driven him to build an empire from scratch. "We're going to shut them down," he declared, with a frightening calm. "Every last one of them, starting with Ivan." The next day, Jacob brought the news they had been waiting for. They had located an isolated property on the outskirts of Sonoma County, registered under a subsidiary of the New Horizons Foundation. Satellite images showed a main structure surrounded by smaller annexes, all protected by an advanced security system. Looks like a small campus, Jacob observed, or a very discreet laboratory. The plan was beginning to take shape when something unexpected happened. Upon returning from a meeting with lawyers who were preparing the legal groundwork to dismantle the foundation, Robert found Lyra's room empty. A note written in the girl's uneven handwriting said only, "I'm sorry, but I can't let them find me. They can't know I talked." The despair that seized Robert was overwhelming. He searched every corner of the apartment, questioned Mrs. Gable, the doorman, the building's security guards. No one had seen Lyra leave. The only witness, Annie, seemed strangely calm. "Sis went to get help," the little girl said while calmly coloring a drawing. She saw the man with the shiny necklace. The necklace man! Robert knelt to the girl's level, ignoring the pain the movement caused. "What man, Annie?" The description that followed, though vague and childlike, perfectly matched Ivan Croft, known for wearing a distinctive solid gold pendant, a gift from his father, a wealthy rancher from the heartland. "The bad man who lied to you," Annie added without looking up from her drawing. He was close by. Lyra saw him. At that moment, Robert understood what had happened. Somehow Ivan had discovered that Lyra was with him. Perhaps he had followed the girl. Perhaps he had informants at the hospital. And Lyra, fearing her presence would endanger Annie, had decided to confront the man alone. Or worse, turn herself in to protect everyone. "We need to find her now," Robert instructed Jacob over the phone, his voice trembling with urgency. "And we need to find out where Ivan is right this moment." The search mobilized all available resources. Security cameras around the building were checked, app-based drivers were questioned, nearby shops were consulted. It was a doorman from the neighboring building who finally offered a clue. He had seen a girl matching Lyra's description getting into a black car, apparently of her own free will. "She seemed determined," the man reported. "I saw no sign of coercion." Meanwhile, Jacob's contacts located Ivan at a luxury hotel on the Embarcadero. The former CFO was apparently preparing to leave the country. His private jet was scheduled to take off the next morning for Zurich. The night that followed was one of intense planning. Robert, ignoring medical advice, pushed his body to the limit in physical therapy sessions. The progress made with Lyra's help now allowed him to stand with the aid of crutches for short periods, enough for what he planned to do. Dr. Evans, concerned, tried to dissuade him. "You don't have enough stability yet. You could fall, you could worsen the injury." "I have no choice," Robert replied, determined. "I'm not leaving Lyra in that man's hands, nor will I miss the chance to find Matt." The next morning, while Annie stayed under Mrs. Gable's care, Robert headed to the hotel accompanied by Jacob and two of his most trusted men. The plan was simple: confront Ivan on his own turf, using surprise as an advantage. The hotel receptionist, immediately recognizing one of the most powerful men in the Bay Area, didn't hesitate to provide the number of the presidential suite. The elevator seemed to take an eternity, each second amplifying Robert's anxiety and determination. When they finally reached the desired floor, the suite door was ajar. Jacob signaled for the others to remain alert while he checked the interior, his hand on the gun he carried discreetly. What they found inside left them stunned. Ivan Croft, the man they were looking for, was unconscious on the floor. Beside him, Lyra, pale and trembling, but with her eyes shining with determination. "He'll be fine," she said, seeing Robert enter, leaning on his crutches. "He'll just be asleep for a few hours, long enough for him not to catch that plane." "How did you—" Robert began, but then he understood. The same gift that allowed Lyra to transfer life energy also enabled the reverse, to temporarily drain someone's strength. "I had to do it," the girl explained, still trembling. "For he was going to escape. And he knows where your son is." Jacob quickly checked Ivan's vital signs, confirming the man was merely unconscious. Then he examined the suite for documents or evidence. On the desk, he found an open laptop and several methodically organized flash drives. "Looks like our friend was preparing for a permanent trip," the investigator commented, examining the files on the computer. "There are transfer documents to offshore banks, records of properties in Portugal, and—" "Wait a minute." His eyes widened as he found a folder titled The Talents Project Phase 2. Inside were dozens of files with children's profiles, all with documented extraordinary abilities. Among them, a recent photo of Matt accompanied by a detailed report on his development. "He's on a ranch in Sonoma County," Jacob confirmed, quickly reading the document. "And it looks like they were planning to transfer him to an international unit in the coming days." Robert felt his heart race. So close. After so long, he was so close to finding his son. He turned to Lyra, who was now sitting, fighting against exhaustion. "Why did you run away? Why didn't you tell me?" "Because he has people everywhere," she replied, pointing at Ivan, "even in your building. I heard your driver talking on the phone about us. I couldn't risk them taking Annie again, or doing something to you." The revelation that there was a traitor in his inner circle hit Robert like a physical blow. Still, there was no time to fully digest this information. With Ivan incapacitated and the documents in hand, they had a window of opportunity they couldn't afford to waste. "How long will he be like this?" he asked Lyra, gesturing toward Ivan. "About 6 hours, maybe more. I took a lot of energy from him." Robert exchanged a look with Jacob, a silent plan forming between them. Enough time to get to Sonoma before anyone realizes he's missing. What followed was an operation as swift as it was risky. While Jacob's men tied and gagged Ivan, leaving him under watch at the hotel, Robert contacted his lawyers, instructing them to prepare search and seizure warrants based on the newly discovered evidence. "We can't wait for the justice system," he explained to Lyra, as they headed to the helipad on the roof of one of his corporate buildings. "If Ivan has people infiltrated even among my staff, we can't trust the system." The girl nodded, understanding the urgency perfectly. "But we can't go without Annie. She'll sense Matt's presence before we even get there. That's her gift." A quick call to Mrs. Gable ensured that Annie would be waiting for them at the helipad. The housekeeper, though confused by the situation, followed the instructions without question. Years of loyal service had built a trust that surpassed the need for detailed explanations. The helicopter cut through the California sky toward wine country as Robert carefully studied the layout of the Sonoma property, extracted from Ivan's files. It was a larger complex than they had imagined, with several interconnected buildings and a sophisticated security system. "They have armed guards," Jacob warned, concerned. "This won't be a simple operation." "We don't need brute force," Lyra intervened. "If we can get to the main house without being seen, I can neutralize anyone who tries to stop us." The girl's confidence impressed Robert. At 12 years old, she displayed a courage and determination that many adults would never achieve. Annie, who had been quiet during the trip, suddenly pointed down. "There," she said simply. "The boy with the boat is down there." They were still a few miles from their destination, flying over a dense forest area between vineyards. Nothing visible indicated the presence of any structure, yet the certainty in the little girl's voice was unquestionable. "She can feel it," Lyra explained. "The closer we get, the stronger the connection becomes." The helicopter landed in an open field about 2 miles from the property, as planned. The final approach would be on foot, using a secondary trail identified in the satellite images. Jacob had arranged for an all-terrain vehicle to be waiting for them, driven by one of his trusted men. For Robert, every meter covered was simultaneously a physical torment and a renewal of hope. The crutches made progress slow on the uneven terrain, but determination overcame any discomfort. Several times Lyra offered help, a quick touch on his arm that infused enough energy to continue. As they neared the property's edge, hidden by vegetation, they could finally see the main structure, a large, colonial-style house, surrounded by smaller annexes that looked like labs or dormitories. Guards patrolled the perimeter at regular intervals, and security cameras were strategically positioned. "How are we getting in?" Jacob whispered, assessing the challenge. It was Annie who answered, with the disarming simplicity of children. "Through the back door. No one is there right now." Once again, the girl's extraordinary perception guided them. Skirting the property, staying under the cover of the vegetation, they managed to reach a secondary service entrance. As Annie had predicted, there were no guards at that moment. Apparently, they were gathered at the other end of the property, where a supply truck was creating an unplanned but welcome distraction. Entering the complex was surprisingly easy. Inside, however, the real challenge began. locating Matt among the various buildings without alerting the entire security system. "Where to now?" Robert asked, his heart pounding in his chest. Annie, without hesitation, pointed to one of the annexes, a low building with small windows resembling a school. "There, in the blue room." As they advanced carefully, avoiding security cameras via routes indicated by Lyra, who knew the place from her own stay, Robert couldn't help but notice the disturbing atmosphere. The place looked like a perfectly normal school or research center, with classrooms, educational equipment, and play areas. But there was something deeply wrong. All the doors had locks on the outside, the windows were reinforced, and occasional muffled cries echoed through the corridors. "What do they do here?" he asked, horrified. "Tests," Lyra replied with bitterness. "They push us to our limits to see how far our gifts can go. Some call it research, I call it torture." When they finally reached the corridor where Matt was supposed to be, they faced an obstacle. A man in a white lab coat, apparently a researcher, was just leaving the room Annie had indicated. Before they could hide, they were spotted. The man froze for a moment, clearly surprised by the presence of intruders. His eyes moved from Robert to the girls, and a flash of recognition crossed his face upon seeing Lyra. "The girl who escaped," he murmured, slowly backing toward an alarm button on the wall. Jacob moved quickly, ready to intercept him, but Lyra was faster. With a fluid gesture, she touched the researcher's arm. The man stopped dead. His eyes lost focus, and he slid gently to the floor, unconscious. "Quick," Lyra gasped, visibly shaken by the effort. "He'll wake up soon." "I didn't take much energy from him." Robert moved to the door the man had just left, his heart nearly bursting with anxiety. The nameplate on the door simply read, "Subject M7. With trembling hands, he turned the knob. The room was simple, almost Spartan. A bed, a desk, a few shelves with neatly organized books, and sitting on the floor, building something with magnetic pieces that floated slightly above his hands, was a boy of about 8. Thinner, with longer hair, but unmistakable to a father's heart. "Matt," Robert whispered, his voice thick with emotion. The boy looked up, the pieces falling silently onto the carpet. His gaze, initially cautious, transformed into pure disbelief, then into an explosion of joy so intense it lit up the entire room. "Dad?" he asked, as if afraid he was dreaming. "Dad, is it really you?" Before Robert could answer, the boy had already thrown himself at him, hugging him with enough force to nearly knock over his crutches. In that desperate embrace, 2 years of separation vanished like mist in the sun. Father and son, finally reunited, cried without shame or restraint. The moment of pure joy, however, was brief. The reality of the situation, they were in the center of a hostile facility surrounded by armed guards, quickly reasserted itself. "We need to get out of here now," Jacob warned, checking the corridor, "before they find out what happened." Matt, wiping away his tears, looked at the girls as if only now noticing their presence. His eyes widened in recognition of Lyra. "You came back," he said with a radiant smile. "You said you'd come back to help us, and you really did." "A promise is a promise," she replied with a tired smile. "Now let's go, all of us." It was then that Matt hesitated, looking at the door next to his. "We can't leave the others. There are more kids here, kids like us." Robert and Jacob exchanged worried glances. The plan was to rescue Matt and leave as quickly as possible. Freeing other children would complicate the operation exponentially, increasing the risks. But then Robert saw the determination in his son's face, the same determination he saw in the mirror every day, and knew they couldn't just turn their backs. "How many children?" he asked Matt. "On this hall, 5 more, the boy replied. "They're the youngest in the project. The beginners, as they call them." The decision was made. They would leave no one behind. Quickly, Jacob and Lyra began to open the other doors, while Robert and Annie stayed with Matt. Within minutes, 5 additional children, all between 4 and 9 years old, were gathered in the hallway, looking at the adults with a mixture of hope and fear. "We'll go back the way we came," Jacob instructed. "Stay together and be absolutely silent." The escape through the facility's corridors was tense. Every corner represented a potential encounter with guards, every open door a possible trap. Matt, surprisingly, took on a leadership role among the children, keeping them calm and organized. In one particularly dangerous moment, when 2 guards appeared unexpectedly in their path, The boy demonstrated why he was so valuable to the project. With a concentrated gesture, he made the guns fly from the men's hands, giving Lyra time to approach and neutralize them with her touch. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, they reached the back exit. Freedom was just a few meters away when a piercing alarm cut through the air. Someone had discovered the escape, perhaps the unconscious researcher, perhaps security cameras they had failed to avoid. "Run!" Jacob ordered, taking the lead to guide the group to the hidden vehicle. The journey to the all-terrain vehicle, hidden in the dense vegetation, became a desperate race against time. Robert, not yet fully adapted to his crutches, struggled to keep up, motivated only by the sight of Matt running ahead of him, finally free after 2 years of captivity. With every step, the entrepreneur felt sharp pains shooting up his spine, but not for a second did he consider slowing down. "You can do it, Dad," Matt shouted, turning back briefly, his eyes shining with a mix of concern and determination. Behind them, the sound of voices and dogs indicated that the chase had already begun. Jacob, leading the group, guided the children along the safest path, while his assistant prepared the vehicle for a quick departure. When they finally reached the clearing where the jeep was waiting, a new complication arose. The vehicle wouldn't comfortably fit all of them, 3 adults and 7 children. "You'll have to squeeze in," Jacob decided, helping the smaller children get in first. Lyra and Annie in the front with the driver, the other kids in the back seat, and the 3 of us in the cargo bed. It wasn't ideal, especially for Robert with his limited mobility, but there was no alternative. The barking of the search dogs was getting closer. As they organized the hasty boarding, Matt tugged on his father's shirt sleeve, pointing to the dense woods on the left. "There's someone over there," he whispered, with the certainty of someone who possessed senses beyond the normal. Before Robert could react, a figure emerged from between the trees, a woman of about 40, dressed in a nurse's uniform, her face marked by an expression of determination and fear. "Sarah," exclaimed one of the rescued children, a boy of about 7. "You came!" Jacob immediately drew his weapon, aiming at the newcomer. "Who are you?" "I'm a nurse at the facility," she replied, her hands raised in a gesture of surrender. "I've been taking care of these children for almost 3 years. I'm not here to stop you, I came to help." Lyra, who was already in the vehicle, quickly got out and approached the woman. The two exchanged a look filled with meaning. "She's trustworthy," the girl declared to Robert's surprise. "Sarah always protected us inside as much as she could. She's the one who helped me escape the first time." The revelation surprised everyone, but there was no time for long explanations. The barking grew closer with each second. "Get in the car," Jacob ordered, still suspicious but willing to accept Lyra's judgment. "But know that I'm watching you." With everyone finally settled, uncomfortably packed, but safe, the vehicle took off, skidding on the loose dirt before finding traction and speeding down the rugged trail. Through the rear window, they could see armed guards emerging from the property, too late to stop them. The journey to the helicopter was tense. The jeep shook violently on the poor road, while Jacob maintained radio contact with the pilot, instructing him to prepare for immediate takeoff. In the back seat, the younger children cried silently, frightened by the situation, but determined not to make any noise that could compromise them. Matt, sitting between his father and Jacob in the cargo bed, maintained an impressive calm. His eyes, however, never stopped scanning the path behind them, as if expecting pursuers to appear at any moment. "They won't give up easily," Sarah commented, breaking the tense silence. "These children are worth millions to the project, especially your son, Mr. Monroe." Robert frowned, surprised that she knew his name. "How do you—" "Everyone at the facility knows who Matt Monroe is," she explained with a sad smile. "The son of the powerful entrepreneur who died in an accident, but was actually our most valuable patient for the last 2 years. The word patient made Robert shudder. What did they do to him? What did they do to all these children? Sarah hesitated, looking at the little ones who might overhear. Lowering her voice, she replied, "Tests, evaluations, forced training to enhance their natural abilities. Some researchers were less kind than others." The look she gave Matt contained a silent apology, which the boy seemed to understand. As he nodded slightly, "They wanted me to move bigger and bigger things," the boy revealed. with a painful maturity for his 8 years. At first it was toys, then chairs, then whole pieces of equipment. When I couldn't or got too tired, his voice broke and he didn't finish the sentence. Robert wrapped his arm around his son's shoulders, pulling him closer. The anger he felt was so intense that it took all his self-control not to show it physically. Never again, he promised, kissing the top of the boy's head. They will never touch you again. When they finally reached the field where the helicopter was waiting, new concerns arose. The aircraft, chartered to carry a maximum of 6 passengers, would now have to take 11. It's impossible, the pilot declared, eyeing the group with worried eyes. It would exceed the maximum weight. I couldn't even take off. How long until we can get another transport? Robert asked, aware that they couldn't remain exposed for long. At least an hour, Jacob replied after quickly consulting his contacts. And even then, I don't know if we could get something big enough for everyone. The dilemma was clear and painful. Who would stay behind, risking recapture? It was Sarah who offered a solution. I know a safe place about half an hour from here. An old farm that belonged to my family. We can split up. Some go in the helicopter, others in the jeep to the farm. From there, we'll organize the next step. After a brief deliberation, they decided that Robert, Matt, Lyra, and Annie would go in the helicopter, returning immediately to San Francisco. Jacob, Sarah, and the other 5 children would go to the farm, where they would await instructions. The separation was quick and emotionally charged. The children, who had shared captivity for so long, were reluctant to part, fearful they would never see each other again. Matt hugged each of them, whispering promises that they would soon be together again. We won't forget you, he assured them, with a conviction that moved even Jacob. We're a family now. The helicopter took off under the orange sky of the late California afternoon, leaving behind a cloud of dust and apprehension. In the jeep, Sarah and Jacob exchanged determined looks before heading in the opposite direction, taking the children to the temporary refuge. During the flight back to San Francisco, Robert finally had time to truly observe his son, noticing every change that had occurred in the 2 years of separation. Matt was thinner and taller. His eyes carried a shadow of experiences no child should have. Yet his essence remained intact, the insatiable curiosity, the innate kindness, the deep connection with those around him. How did you do it? Robert asked, breaking the contemplative silence. How did you endure all that time without giving up? Matt completed with a shy smile. I knew you would come, Dad. Even when they said you had died, that you had abandoned me, I knew it wasn't true. The words hit Robert like a physical blow. They told you I was dead? Matt nodded. They even showed me newspaper articles, but I didn't believe them. Every night, before I went to sleep, I would close my eyes and try to feel you. It was like a thin thread connecting us, you know. Faint, but it never broke. On the other side of the helicopter, Lyra watched the interaction with interest. That's how it works for some of us, she explained. It's not just moving things or healing wounds. It's a deeper connection with those we love, like Annie finding people she's never seen, like Matt feeling you even from far away. The simplicity with which she explained something so extraordinary left Robert speechless. His entire understanding of the world, based on logic and science, was being rewritten before his eyes. Why these children? He finally asked. Why did they choose them? They didn't choose us, Lyra replied. We were already like this. They just found us, in orphanages, in shelters, in vulnerable situations where no one would miss us. Children with gifts are more common than people think. Most learn to hide it, or simply don't develop their potential. But some like us can't hide it. Robert thought of Matt, of how the boy had always had a keen perception, a strange ability to know what others were thinking. Small accidents where objects would fall or move without explanation around him. And Ivan? How did he get involved in this? It was Matt who answered. He used to visit us often. He didn't talk much, just watched the tests and took notes. The researchers treated him like the boss. And were there others? Robert insisted, trying to grasp the scale of the conspiracy. Many others, Lyra confirmed. Rich, important people. They came from other countries sometimes, to see our progress. The implication was frightening. A potentially powerful international network interested in exploiting children with special abilities. Something much larger than just Ivan Croft and his Front Foundation. When the helicopter finally landed on the helipad in San Francisco, it was already night. The city sparkled below them, oblivious to the unfolding drama. Robert had instructed his security team to reinforce the protection of the penthouse, and Mrs. Gable was preparing a special dinner to welcome Matt, though no one outside the immediate circle knew the boy had been found. Upon arriving at the penthouse, a surprise awaited them. Dr. Evans was there, accompanied by 2 police officers. The doctor seemed extremely nervous. "Robert," he began hesitantly, "these officers have some questions about Ivan Croft. He was found in his hotel, unconscious and tied up. He mentioned your name when he woke up." The officers, fortunately, seemed more intrigued than accusatory. One of them, who introduced himself as Detective Marcus O'Connell, explained the situation. "Mr. Croft claims he was kidnapped by your men. Mr. Monroe. He says you're obsessed with a conspiracy theory about your missing son, and that it has led you to extreme measures." Robert maintained his composure, even as he felt the tension rising within him. Behind him, Matt held his hand tightly, partially hidden by his father's back. "An interesting theory," Robert replied with studied calm, "and quite convenient for Mr. Croft, considering he was about to flee the country with millions embezzled from my company." The detective raised an eyebrow. "Do you have proof of these accusations?" "I do," Robert confirmed, "and I have something more." With that, he stepped aside slightly, revealing Matt. The impact was immediate. The officer's eyes widened, recognizing the boy whose disappearance had been national news 2 years earlier. "My son has been held captive all this time," Robert explained, his voice now thick with emotion, "in a facility operated by the New Horizons Foundation, funded by Ivan Croft, with money embezzled from Monroe Enterprises. I have all the documentary evidence, and more importantly, I have witnesses." Over the next few hours, the apartment transformed into an impromptu investigation hub. Detective O'Connell, after overcoming his initial shock, proved to be an honest and efficient man. He mobilized his team to immediately secure the location and began the procedures for a search and seizure warrant on the Sonoma property. "We need to act fast," Robert warned. "There are other children in similar situations, and by now, they're probably already trying to move them or destroy evidence." While the adults organized the police operation, Matt, Lyra, and Annie were left in the care of Mrs. Gable, who welcomed them with warm hugs and the promise of the best mac and cheese you've ever tasted. In the kitchen, away from the adults' ears, Matt finally relaxed. The familiar smell of home cooking, Mrs. Gable's motherly kindness, the sense of security that permeated the home, all acted as a balm for his wounded soul. "Your father nearly went mad when you disappeared, child," Mrs. Gable recounted, as she served generous portions to the children. "He didn't sleep, didn't eat right, and after the accident when he was in the chair, I thought we were going to lose him too." "What accident?" Matt asked, frowning. "What happened to Dad?" The housekeeper realized too late that she had touched on a sensitive subject. "It's nothing you need to worry about now, my boy. The important thing is that you're together again." But Matt, with the persistence typical of his age, was not easily dissuaded. He looked at Lyra, who had become a sort of confidant in recent days. "It was a car," the girl explained, after exchanging a look with Mrs. Gable. "Your father was in a car accident a few days after you disappeared. It damaged his spine. He lost the use of his legs." Matt slowly absorbed the information, the pieces falling into place in his mind. "That's why he uses crutches now. But he was in a wheelchair before." "I've been helping him regain some movement," Lyra revealed, lowering her voice. "Like I do with sick people." Matt's eyes lit up with hope. "Can you heal him completely?" Before Lyra could answer, Annie intervened, with the disconcerting wisdom that sometimes emerged through her childish innocence. "Not without getting hurt a lot," the little girl said, looking directly at her sister. "Lyra gets weak when she heals people. The bigger the injury, the stronger she has to be." The comment brought a thoughtful silence to the kitchen. Matt looked at Lyra with new understanding, finally realizing the sacrifice she had been making, not only for his father, but for all the children she had helped. "Is it true?" he asked finally. Lyra nodded, uncomfortable with the attention. "It's like transferring energy, mine to someone else. It works, but it has a price. Like a battery," Matt concluded, using an analogy that made sense to his young mind. "You run out of charge. Something like that, she agreed with a small smile. Matt was silent for a few moments, processing the information. Then, with renewed determination, he declared, "I'm going to help. I can use my gift to help too." "What do you mean, child?" Mrs. Gable asked, curious. In response, Matt fixed his gaze on a spoon on the table. Slowly, the utensil began to tremble, then to lift a few inches, floating briefly before falling with a metallic clink. "Good heavens!" exclaimed the housekeeper, quickly making the sign of the cross. "Don't be afraid, Mrs. Gable," Lyra reassured her. "It's a gift, like being a good singer or having a talent for painting. Just different." The explanation, though simplified, seemed to partially calm the woman. She still looked at Matt with a mixture of awe and motherly concern. But there was no rejection in her eyes, only a genuine desire to protect a child who had clearly endured trials beyond comprehension. In the living room, meanwhile, Robert coordinated the next steps with Detective O'Connell and Jacob, who had returned to the city, leaving Sarah and the other children in the safety of the farm. "The operation is set for dawn tomorrow," the detective informed them. "I got a court order to enter the property with full force. Judge Mendoza was particularly interested when I mentioned children were involved." "And Ivan?" Robert asked. "Is he still in custody?" "In custody at the hospital," O'Connell confirmed. "Curiously, the doctors can't explain his state of extreme weakness. They say it looks like deep exhaustion, but with no apparent cause." Robert and Jacob exchanged significant looks, knowing exactly what, or rather, who had caused that condition. "As for the children at the farm," the detective continued, "we need to bring them in for statements, but very carefully. From what I understand, they are crucial witnesses, but also extremely vulnerable." "They're not just witnesses," Robert corrected hesitantly. "They are especial." "Special how?" Robert hesitated, unsure of how much to reveal. The reality of the children's gifts was something few would believe without a direct demonstration, and even then, it could generate fear or distrust. "They have unusual abilities," he finally replied. "That's why they were kidnapped. For studies and experiments." The detective's expression darkened. "What kind of experiments are we talking about here, Mr. Monroe?" "The kind that violates every ethical and legal principle imaginable," Jacob intervened. "These children were subjected to intense physical and psychological tests, forced to develop specific skills, sometimes through painful methods. That's," O'Connell seemed to search for the right word, "monstrous and profitable," Robert added bitterly. "There's a lot of money involved." "And powerful people. How powerful?" the detective asked, now clearly concerned. "We're still finding out," Robert admitted. "But Ivan didn't act alone. From what we understand so far, there's an international network interested in these children and their abilities." The conversation was interrupted by the ringing of Jacob's cell phone. The investigator answered quickly, his face turning into a mask of concern as he listened. "When?" he asked, his voice tense. "Anyone hurt?" "I see. Keep them safe and don't leave. We're on our way." Hanging up, he turned to the others with a grave expression. "That was Sarah. Armed men surrounded the farm about half an hour ago. She managed to hide the children in an old cellar before they broke into the house. They're safe for now, but they don't know for how long." "My God," Robert murmured. "How did they find the place so quickly?" "Someone leaked information," O'Connell concluded, already grabbing his radio. "I'll mobilize a tactical team immediately." "There's no time," Jacob interrupted. "The farm is almost a 2-hour drive from here, even at high speed. A police operation would take even longer to organize." Robert made an instant decision. "The helicopter. It's still on the helipad, fueled and ready. We can be there in less than 40 minutes. "It's too risky," the detective warned. "If there are armed men, those children have suffered enough," Robert cut in with unshakable determination. "I'm not abandoning them now." While the adults argued in the living room, they didn't realize they were being watched. In the adjacent hallway, Matt, Lyra, and Annie listened to everything, their faces etched with worry. "They're our friends," Matt whispered, distressed. "We have to help." Lyra nodded, her face serious beyond her years. "We will help, but we need to be smart, not impulsive." "I see them," Annie murmured suddenly, her eyes slightly out of focus as if watching something distant. "They're scared, but they're alive. The bad man hasn't found them yet." Matt and Lyra exchanged surprised looks. Annie's gift seemed to be developing rapidly, becoming more precise and controlled. "Who is the bad man?" Matt asked gently. "The man with the shiny necklace," Annie replied, still in a trance. "He's there. He's looking." Lyra turned pale. "Ivan, he must have been released. Or escaped." Without hesitation, the children returned to the living room, interrupting the heated discussion of the adults. "Ivan is at the farm," Lyra announced urgently. Annie saw him. "He's looking for the hidden children." Detective O'Connell looked at the girl with evident skepticism, but Robert and Jacob didn't question the information. "How did he get there so fast?" Jacob asked, perplexed. "It doesn't matter how," Robert intervened. "What matters is that we need to act now." O'Connell, still visibly confused by the dynamics of the situation, finally relented. "I'll go with you. And I'll authorize a tactical operation to meet us there. But we need a concrete plan. We can't just storm a location with armed men." "I have a plan," declared Matt, stepping forward with a confidence surprising for someone so young. "And it will work, I promise." The adults looked at the boy with expressions ranging from surprise to skepticism. But Robert, recognizing in his son the same determination that had always guided his own actions, nodded. "We're listening, son." Matt took a deep breath, organizing his thoughts. "They're looking for hidden children, right? So let's give them what they want." "What do you mean?" Jacob asked, confused. "Me and Lyra," Matt explained. "We're the most valuable ones to them. If they see us, they'll focus all their attention on us, forgetting the others for a while." "Absolutely not," Robert protested, horrified. "I'm not putting you in danger again." "We're not in danger if you're nearby," Matt argued. "And it's not a real sacrifice, it's a calculated distraction. Something they taught me without meaning to." The plan, as Matt detailed it, was both simple and risky. Use himself and Lyra as visible bait, drawing the intruder's attention away from the other children's hiding place. Meanwhile, Jacob's team and the police could surround the location, neutralizing the threat. "It's too dangerous," Robert insisted. "There must be another way." "There's no time for another way," Lyra replied, with the maturity of someone much older. "Every minute we waste is a minute they could find our friends." The children's firmness was impressive. Though reluctant, Robert began to consider the proposal, recognizing the logic behind it. "If we do this," he said finally, "it will be with maximum protection. Bulletproof vests for both of you, constant communication, and no unnecessary risks. And we'll need Annie too," Matt added. "She can tell us where the men are even before we see them." O'Connell, who had been watching the discussion with growing perplexity, intervened. "Is someone going to explain to me how this little girl could possibly know where people she hasn't even seen are?" An uncomfortable silence followed the question. Finally, Robert sighed, knowing he would have to share at least part of the truth. "Detective, what we're about to face goes beyond what most people would consider possible. These children have special abilities. That's precisely why they were kidnapped." "What kind of abilities are we talking about?" O'Connell asked, disbelief evident in his voice. In response, Matt fixed his gaze on the coffee cup on the table next to the detective. Slowly, to the officer's complete astonishment, the cup rose a few inches, floating briefly before gently landing back down. "Good Lord," O'Connell murmured, instinctively recoiling. "How? Is this some kind of trick?" "It's not a trick," Robert replied calmly. "And that's exactly why unscrupulous people are willing to kidnap, experiment on, and exploit these children." The detective needed a few moments to process what he had just witnessed. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost all disbelief, replaced by a renewed determination. "This changes everything, and it explains the international interest, the money involved." He looked at the children with a new understanding. "We'll follow your plan, but with extreme caution." The preparations were quick and efficient. While Jacob organized the necessary equipment, O'Connell discreetly mobilized a special tactical team, without revealing all the details of the operation. Robert, for his part, faced the most difficult challenge, preparing himself physically and emotionally for the mission, knowing the limitations imposed by his condition. "You don't have to go in person," Jacob argued, concerned. "You can coordinate everything from here safely." "My son will be there," Robert replied simply. "I'm not staying behind." The entrepreneur's determination was unshakable. With the help of Dr. Evans, who had arrived hastily after being summoned, Robert underwent an intensive session with Lyra, the last before the operation. The doctor protested vehemently, warning of the risks of pushing his body beyond its current limits. "You're progressing well, but organically," he warned. "Forcing the process could cause permanent damage." "We have no choice," Robert replied. "I need to be functional for this operation." The session was intense and painful for both of them. Lyra, already tired from previous healings, grew visibly pale as she channeled her energy. Robert felt as if every nerve in his body was being reactivated simultaneously, a sensation between agony and ecstasy. When they finished, the entrepreneur was able to stand unsupported for the first time in 2 years. His steps were unsteady, and Dr. Evans insisted he still use a cane for stability, but the improvement was undeniable and almost miraculous. Lyra, on the other hand, looked as if she had aged years in a few minutes. Her face was as pale as paper, with deep dark circles framing her eyes. She had to be carried to the sofa, where Annie immediately rushed to her side, holding her hands with concern. "You went too far," the little one whispered, distressed. "It had to be done." Lyra replied with a faint smile. "I just need to rest a little." But there was no time for proper rest. In less than an hour, they were on their way to the helipad, ready for the operation that could definitively dismantle the network exploiting special children and save those still in danger. "Impressive operation," Robert commented as he was led into the main room. "How many children have you processed through this system?" "Processed is such a cold word," Ivan replied, gesturing for them to sit. "We prefer to think we are developing extraordinary potential. Talents that would otherwise be wasted in orphanages or on the streets, or with their families," Robert added, unable to completely hide his bitterness. Ivan smiled humorlessly. "Cases like Matt's are exceptional. Most of our discoveries come from situations where no one would really miss them, children invisible to the system." While keeping the conversation going, Robert discreetly observed his surroundings. 2 armed men remained in the room. Others could be heard moving through the house. Through the window, he could see 3 more patrolling the outer perimeter. There were only a few minutes left before the extraction operation began. "And what is this extraordinary potential used for?" he asked, trying to keep Ivan talking. "You're a businessman, Robert," the former director replied with calculated familiarity. "Can you imagine the value of someone with your son's abilities? The capacity to move objects without touching them, applied to industry, medicine, military technology?" Turning to Lyra, he continued, "Or the potential for accelerated healing for pharmaceuticals and revolutionary treatments. Being exploited like lab rats," Lyra commented with a calmness that barely concealed her disgust. "Being guided to maximize their capabilities," Ivan corrected, unfazed. "Temporary discomfort is a small price for the advancement they represent." Matt, who had been watching silently, finally spoke. "Is that what you tell yourself to sleep at night? That you're guiding children when you're actually torturing them?" The brutal frankness of the comment seemed to hit Ivan like a physical blow. For a moment, his mask of sophistication fell, revealing something almost vulnerable underneath. "You don't understand the full picture, boy," he said, recovering quickly. "There are larger forces at play, people with broader visions than mine, than your father's." "What people?" Robert asked, trying to extract more information while buying time. Ivan smiled enigmatically. "That's not part of our current negotiation, is it? We're here to discuss a deal regarding the children on this property." At that moment, the small communicator in Robert's ear emitted an almost imperceptible signal. The extraction had begun. He needed to keep Ivan completely focused for a few more minutes. "I'm particularly curious about one thing," Robert said, leaning forward slightly. "How did you find out about Matt's gift? He was always discreet, even at home." The question seemed to genuinely intrigue Ivan, who relaxed slightly as if pleased to demonstrate his shrewdness. "The nanny. Fiona wasn't just a hired employee," he explained with evident satisfaction. "She was one of our spotters, people with a sensitivity for detecting special children. She observed Matt for only 2 weeks before confirming her suspicions. So it was all planned from the beginning," Robert concluded, feeling a renewed wave of anger. "You planted someone in my house specifically for this." "Actually, it was more opportunistic than planned," Ivan admitted. "We routinely place spotters in positions where they can observe children from influential families. Most never find anything of interest. Fiona got lucky. As the conversation continued, Matt discreetly sought Lyra's gaze, establishing a silent communication. The girl seemed increasingly pale but remained alert, clearly conserving her energy for the right moment. Outside, the storm was approaching. Lightning occasionally illuminated the room's interior through the windows, creating dramatic shadows that danced on the walls. The distant sound of thunder added a layer of tension to the already charged atmosphere. "How much longer do you plan to entertain me with this conversation, Monroe?" Ivan asked suddenly, his tone hardening. "We both know you didn't really come to negotiate. What's really happening here?" The direct question caught Robert momentarily off guard. Before he could formulate a response, Matt intervened. "We're doing exactly what you taught us, Mr. Croft," the boy said with a chilling calm. "Creating an effective distraction." The words had barely been spoken when the sound of shattering glass echoed from somewhere in the house, followed by muffled shouts and the unmistakable sound of bodies falling. Ivan's reaction was instantaneous. He drew a gun from inside his jacket and stood up abruptly. His men in the room immediately aimed their weapons at Robert and the children. "You damned traitor!" Ivan hissed, his face contorted in fury. "This was never a negotiation." "That's exactly what Matt said," Robert replied, remaining surprisingly calm in the face of the pointed guns. "A distraction. Something you inadvertently taught him." Outside, the sounds of confrontation intensified. The operation had begun, and it was now a matter of minutes before O'Connell's forces reached the main room. "This isn't going to end the way you expect," Ivan warned, his finger tense on the trigger. "Even if your friends get the children, you won't leave this room alive." It was at this critical moment that Matt and Lyra finally acted. With a concentrated gesture, the boy made the two guards' guns fly from their hands, while Lyra moved with surprising speed for someone so exhausted, quickly touching one of the men, who immediately collapsed, unconscious. The second guard, momentarily confused by the loss of his weapon, tried to physically advance on Matt, only to be knocked down by a precise blow from Robert with his cane. Ivan, however, still held his gun firmly pointed at Robert. "Impressive teamwork," he commented with a disturbing calm. "But this ends now." The next moment seemed to happen in slow motion. Ivan aimed his weapon at Matt, clearly calculating that hitting the son would be more devastating to Robert than attacking him directly. His finger moved to the trigger, while Robert instinctively lunged forward, trying to shield his son with his own body. What happened next defied all logic. The gun in Ivan's hand simply imploded, disintegrating into small metallic fragments that fell to the floor like fine rain. The man stared at his empty hand in absolute disbelief. All eyes turned to Matt, whose expression of intense concentration gradually relaxed. "I learned a few new tricks in the last 2 years," he explained simply. At that exact moment, the door to the room burst open and Detective O'Connell entered, followed by his tactical team. "Everybody on the ground! Federal Police!" Ivan, recognizing defeat, slowly raised his hands. His gaze, however, was fixed on Robert with a disturbing intensity. "This doesn't end here, Monroe," he said as he was being handcuffed. "There are far more powerful people involved, people who won't simply give up on such valuable assets." "Then they'll have to deal with me too," Robert replied firmly. "And believe me, after what you did to my son, I'm just beginning my crusade against you." As Ivan was led away by the tactical team, Jacob entered the room, his face lit with a smile of relief. "We got them," he announced triumphantly. "All the children are safe. Sarah is with them on the rescue helicopter. No serious injuries on our side, and all the intruders have been neutralized." The tension that had kept Robert functioning for the past few hours finally gave way. Feeling his legs weaken, he let himself fall into a nearby armchair, as Matt and Lyra rushed to his side. "Dad, are you okay?" Matt asked, concerned. "I am," he assured him with a tired smile. "Just need a moment." That was an intense. Lyra, studying him with knowing eyes, commented, "You pushed yourself further than you should have. The newly healed nerves aren't fully stable yet." "It was worth it," Robert replied, looking at his son with indescribable love. Every second of pain was worth it. As the storm finally broke over the farm, the group awaited the arrival of the second helicopter that would take them back to San Francisco. The intense rain washed not only the earth, but seemed to symbolically cleanse some of the trauma experienced in that place. 3 months later, The penthouse in Pacific Heights had been transformed. What was once a minimalist and cold space, decorated with the impersonality of architecture magazines, had become a true home. Colorful drawings adorned the refrigerator. Occasionally forgotten toys appeared in the most unexpected corners, and the sound of children's laughter regularly echoed through the halls. In addition to Matt, who was gradually reclaiming his stolen childhood, the Monroe family now officially included Lyra and Annie, whose adoption processes had been expedited, thanks to Robert's influence, and the favorable testimony of Detective O'Connell. The other children rescued from the farm had been reintegrated with their original families when possible, or placed under special state protection in cases where relatives could not be located. Sarah, the nurse who had risked everything to protect them, now coordinated a specialized program developed by the Monroe Foundation for Special Children, a genuine organization created by Robert to offer support and protection to youths with extraordinary gifts. On the spacious balcony of the penthouse, as the sun set over the San Francisco Bay, Robert watched the scene he never imagined possible. Matt and Annie were playing a board game animatedly, while Lyra read quietly on a nearby lounge chair. "Any news on the case?" Lyra asked, looking up from her book upon noticing Robert contemplating them. He sighed, approaching with steps that were still careful but increasingly steady. Months of intensive physical therapy, combined with regular and controlled sessions with Lyra, now allowed him to walk with only the occasional support of a cane. "Ivan's trial begins next month," he replied, sitting beside her. "O'Connell believes we have a solid case. The evidence is irrefutable. And the others?" the girl asked, referring to the mysterious international backers Ivan had mentioned. "Any progress?" Robert frowned slightly. "It's more complicated. The documents point to shell companies, fake foundations, an elaborate web. But we're making progress. Jacob has teams investigating on 3 continents. The determination in his tone was evident. Since Matt's rescue, Robert had completely transformed his life. The company continued to thrive under his leadership, but now a large portion of his resources and influence was directed at dismantling the network that had kidnapped his son and so many other children. "Will they come after you again?" The question came from Matt, who had apparently been listening to the conversation while playing with Annie. Robert exchanged a look with Lyra before answering honestly, "They might try, but we're prepared now. And we're not alone anymore." Indeed, the security around them had been completely overhauled. In addition to the advanced technological protocols implemented at the residence and offices, they had the constant support of O'Connell and his specialized unit of the Federal Police, which now officially investigated cases related to the trafficking of children with special abilities. More important than physical security, however, was the emotional and social support network they had built. Dr. Evans supervised not only Robert's physical recovery, but also the psychological well-being of the children, developing specific therapeutic protocols for youths who had experienced trauma associated with their special gifts. "You're all progressing so well," Robert commented, observing how Matt could now control his abilities without the extreme stress that once accompanied them, and how Lyra had learned to dose her energy during healing sessions, avoiding devastating exhaustion. "We have good teachers," Matt replied, with a luminous smile that still made Robert's heart ache with emotion. There were moments when the entrepreneur still woke up in the middle of the night, terrified by the possibility that it was all a dream, that Matt was still lost, that he was still confined to his wheelchair, trapped in his own bitterness. At those times, he would get up silently and go to his son's room, just to watch him sleep safe and at peace. Sometimes he would find Lyra in the hallway, doing the exact same thing with Annie, a habit formed over years of protecting her younger sister. "What do you think about a boat trip tomorrow?" Robert suggested, remembering the passion Matt had always had for the sea. "We could go to Sausalito, spend the day on the water." The children's eyes lit up at the prospect. Even Lyra, usually more restrained in her reactions, showed genuine enthusiasm. "Can I bring my new boat?" Matt asked, referring to the model sailboat he had built with his father in recent weeks, a resumption of the hobby they had shared before the separation. "Of course you can," Robert assured him. "And we can test out those modifications we discussed." The evening progressed peacefully, with the family routine settling in naturally. After dinner, prepared with the enthusiastic help of Annie, who showed a surprising talent for cooking, the children retired to their rooms, each decorated according to their preferences and personalities. Robert remained on the balcony, contemplating the illuminated city and the moon's reflection on the water. Mrs. Gable brought him a cup of tea before retiring, commenting casually how he looked 10 years younger since the children arrived. "It's because I'm finally living again, Mrs. Gable," he replied simply, "not just existing." Alone with his thoughts, Robert reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past few months. The pain, the despair, the renewed hope, the confrontation, the victory, and now, finally, the rebuilding. A family formed not by blood ties, but by shared experiences and unconditional love. His cell phone vibrated, interrupting his reflections. It was a message from Jacob. Possible connection found in Switzerland. Linked to a pharmaceutical conglomerate. Investigating. The fight continued. The network that had stolen 2 years of his son's life and traumatized so many other children still existed, though weakened. Robert knew that dismantling it completely would be a work of years, perhaps decades, but he also knew with absolute certainty that he would not rest until the last piece of that perverse system was exposed and neutralized. For now, however, he allowed himself to enjoy the present moment, the peace of that night, the security of having his family gathered under one roof, the gratitude for every step he could take on his own 2 feet. The next morning, the boat trip was even better than planned. The bay was exceptionally calm, with crystal-clear waters that allowed them to see colorful schools of fish swimming below the vessel. Matt, using his gift discreetly, ensured that his small sailboat navigated with impressive precision, to the delight of Annie, who enthusiastically applauded every maneuver. Lyra, initially hesitant to enter the water because of the scars that marked her arms, physical reminders of her time in captivity, finally gave in to Robert's gentle encouragement. Watching her gradually relax, allowing herself to be simply a teenager enjoying a day on the water, was a victory for him as significant as any progress in his business or the international investigation. During lunch, at a simple waterfront restaurant in Sausalito, Annie surprised everyone with a seemingly casual observation. "There are more kids like us," she said, while drawing patterns in the sand with her finger. "I can feel them sometimes when I'm almost asleep. Scared kids who need help." Robert exchanged meaningful looks with Lyra and Matt. Annie's gift seemed to be evolving, becoming broader and more precise. "Can you tell where they are?" Robert asked carefully. The girl frowned in concentration. "Far away. Very far away. There's a big water in between." After a moment's hesitation, she added, "They talk different too. Not like us." "Another country," Lyra concluded thoughtfully. "Maybe that's why Jacob is finding connections in Europe." Robert nodded, storing the information to share with the investigation team later. Annie's perceptions had proven to be incredibly accurate in the past. There was no reason to doubt them now. "We're going to help them too, right, Dad?" Matt asked, with the determination that now characterized his interactions when the subject was other children in danger. "We will," Robert assured him, hugging his son. "All of them." The day passed in perfect harmony, swimming in the bay, building sand castles, exploring the small trails that led to more secluded spots. For a few precious hours, they were just a normal family enjoying an outing, without the weight of extraordinary abilities, without the shadow of still existing threats, without the echo of past traumas. As they returned to San Francisco, with the sunset painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Robert felt a peace he hadn't experienced in years. Watching the 3 children asleep on the boat's rear bench, exhausted from the day's fun, he knew with absolute clarity that he had found his true purpose. It wasn't just regaining his mobility. It wasn't just protecting his biological son, nor was it even dismantling the criminal network that had victimized them. It was something simultaneously simpler and more profound, creating a world where children like Matt, Lyra and Annie could grow up safe, understood, and loved for who they truly were. The journey would be long and certainly full of challenges. There were powerful people interested in exploiting the gifts of these children. There were prejudices and fears to overcome in society. There were deep emotional wounds to be healed. But for the first time since Matt's disappearance, Robert felt truly hopeful about the future, because now he was not fighting alone. He had a family by his side, an extraordinary family united not only by love but by a unique understanding of the struggles they faced. And perhaps, he reflected as the boat approached the marina, that had always been the real miracle. Not the physical healing that was gradually restoring his movement, but the healing of the soul that had given him back the ability to love, protect, and fight for something greater than himself. In that moment of crystal clarity, Robert finally understood the words Lyra had spoken at their first meeting, which seemed so distant now. The true gift was not in the extraordinary powers, but in the deep connection they created between people who might otherwise never have met. And that connection, this unlikely family formed through pain and hope, was the greatest treasure he could have found on his journey of redemption. 6 months had passed since that unforgettable day on the water in Sausalito. Autumn was gently arriving in San Francisco, bringing cooler winds and occasionally overcast skies that offered a welcome relief after the intense summer. In the Monroe penthouse, a new normality had taken hold, intertwining family routines with the unique challenges of raising 3 children with extraordinary abilities. That Saturday morning, as the sun still struggled to break through the morning fog over the San Francisco Bay, Robert awoke to the sound of children's laughter coming from the kitchen. He got up with ease, noting with quiet satisfaction how his movements became more fluid each day. The controlled sessions with Lyra, combined with intensive physical therapy, had produced results that doctors classified as inexplicable, a term that now made Robert smile to himself. Upon entering the kitchen, he found a scene that still filled him with wonder and gratitude. Matt, discreetly using his telekinesis, kept 3 oranges floating in the air while Annie looped colorful ribbons around them, creating a kind of impromptu mobile. Mrs. Gable watched the scene with a mixture of admiration and nervousness, still not entirely accustomed to the children's special talents, as she gently called them. "Good morning, family," Robert greeted, immediately receiving enthusiastic hugs from Matt and Annie. "Where's Lyra?" "On the balcony," Mrs. Gable replied, pouring coffee. "That girl is up before the rooster. She's been out there for over an hour with those books of hers." Robert smiled, recognizing the pattern. In recent months, Lyra had developed a voracious passion for scientific studies, especially biology and neuroscience, a natural interest for someone with her ability to manipulate healing processes. Dr. Evans, impressed by her intuition and reasoning, regularly provided her with advanced material, far beyond what would be typical for a 13-year-old. On the spacious balcony that offered a panoramic view of the bay, he found Lyra completely absorbed in a thick volume of neuroanatomy, making meticulous notes in a notebook. "Any interesting discoveries?" he asked, sitting in the chair beside her. Lyra looked up, a smile lighting her usually serious face. In recent months, these moments had become more frequent, brief glimpses of the teenager, behind the premature responsibilities and accumulated trauma. "I'm studying the neural connections in spinal cord injuries," she explained, showing complex diagrams. "I think I can improve the efficiency of our sessions, if I understand exactly which nerves to stimulate." First, Robert felt a wave of emotion hearing our sessions, an acknowledgement that the healing process had become a partnership, not just a gift applied unilaterally. "You didn't have to spend your weekend on this," he commented, genuinely touched. "It's not a sacrifice when you love what you do," she replied, with a wisdom beyond her years. "Besides, the more efficient it is, the less energy I spend." This last observation was particularly important. Over the months, Robert had insisted on strict protocols for the healing sessions, setting firm limits to preserve Lyra's health. Dr. Evans had even developed a monitoring system to ensure she never exceeded certain physiological parameters during the process. Before they could continue their conversation, Robert's phone vibrated. As he checked the screen, his expression shifted subtly, an almost imperceptible tension that Lyra immediately caught. "Jacob?" she asked, already knowing the answer. Robert nodded before answering. "Good morning, Jacob. What have we got?" As he listened, his face shifted between expressions of surprise, concern, and finally determination. "I see. I'll be at the office in an hour. Get everything ready for the video conference. Hanging up, he found not only Lyra, but now also Matt and Annie watching him with questioning gazes. News about the investigation, he explained, knowing it was futile to hide information from the children, especially from Annie, who seemed to pick up on emotional tensions like an ultra-sensitive antenna. Jacob has identified a facility in Argentina that might be operating like the one in Sonoma. Argentina, Annie murmured, her eyes slightly unfocused, the expression they all now recognized when she was accessing her gift. That's where some of the children, I feel, are, but not all of them. The accuracy of the observation no longer surprised Robert. In recent months, Annie's ability to feel other children with gifts had expanded and refined considerably. We'll investigate, he assured her, hugging the little girl. Like we always do. The like we always do had become a familiar mantra. Since the rescue in Sonoma County, the Monroe Foundation for Special Children had become more than a front for protection. It was now a legitimate, though extremely discreet, organization dedicated to identifying, protecting, and supporting children with extraordinary abilities. Working in close collaboration with Detective O'Connell's special unit, they had already located and rescued 11 American children with various types of abilities, from subtle manifestations, like exceptional sensitivity to natural phenomena, to more evident gifts, like communicating with animals or manipulating temperatures. Can I go to the office with you? Matt asked, surprising Robert. Usually the boy avoided anything related to the investigations, preferring to focus on reclaiming his lost childhood. Any special reason? Robert asked carefully. Matt hesitated, exchanging a quick look with Lyra before answering, I've been dreaming about a place I've never seen, with mountains in the background and a lake nearby, and a big house with red doors. He paused briefly as if organizing difficult thoughts. There are children there. Children like me, I think. I think one of them is calling me. The silence that followed was thick with implications. This kind of long-distance connection between special children was something they had theorized about, but never concretely confirmed. Could you draw this place? Robert asked, keeping his voice calm despite his growing excitement. Matt nodded. I already have. It's in my room. Minutes later, they were all gathered around the dining table, looking at a series of meticulous drawings that showed different angles of a rural property with clearly Argentinian architectural features. A traditional estancia with colonial elements, surrounded by wide fields and set against the backdrop of an impressive mountain range. Mendoza, Lyra said immediately. Those mountains are the Andes, and that type of building is typical of the Mendoza wine region. Everyone looked at her in surprise, making her blush slightly. I read a lot about South American geography when I was in that place. They had books about potential expansion areas. The implication was clear. The operation that had victimized them was planning international expansion, or perhaps had already been operating internationally for longer than they suspected. I'm taking this to the office, Robert decided, carefully gathering the drawings. Matt, you can come with me, but only for the initial part of the meeting. Some of the information might be difficult. The boy nodded, understanding the implications. Despite his forced maturity, there were aspects of the investigations from which Robert still tried to protect him. I want to go too, Lyra declared, in a tone that brooked no argument. If we're going to discuss other children with gifts, I need to be there. I understand these powers better than any expert you've hired. It was true, and Robert knew it. In recent months, Lyra had become a crucial informal consultant for the Foundation, helping to develop identification and training protocols that respected the individuality and limits of each special child. All right, he agreed. But Annie stays with Mrs. Gable. To his surprise, the little girl didn't protest, simply stating with seriousness, I'll draw what I see while you're gone. Sometimes I see more clearly when there aren't a lot of people thinking near me. 2 hours later, in Robert's private office atop the building that housed the headquarters of Monroe Enterprises, the meeting was already underway. Matt had participated in the initial presentation, where Jacob had shown the incredible coincidences between the boy's drawings and satellite images of a property on the outskirts of Mendoza. After this dramatic confirmation, Robert had gently suggested he explore the adjoining library, where a small game room had been installed specifically for his visits. Now, only adults remained in the room apart from Lyra, whom Robert had insisted on treating as a full participant, despite the uncomfortable looks from some more conservative executives. "The patterns are unmistakable," Jacob explained, presenting financial documents and corporate records on multiple screens. Same structure of shell companies, same types of international transfers, same profile of hired consultants, many with backgrounds in neuroscience, experimental psychology, and curiously, parapsychology. Detective O'Connell, participating via secure video conference, added, "We've confirmed that at least 3 researchers present at the Sonoma facility traveled to Mendoza in the last 4 months. We're tracking their movements there through cooperation with Argentinian authorities, but the process is delicate." "Delicate why?" Robert asked, sensing something was being left unsaid. O'Connell hesitated visibly. "We have reason to believe that politically connected figures in Argentina may be involved in financing the operation. Not at Ivan's level. We're talking about high-level backers." The revelation did not completely surprise Robert. Since the expanded investigation began, it had become clear that the network exploiting special children had deep roots in circles of power and influence. "What worries me," O'Connell continued, "is the timing. Since we dismantled the Sonoma operation and arrested Ivan, we've detected accelerated movement at the other facilities we've managed to identify. It's as if they're preparing for a rapid relocation, possibly destroying evidence in the process." "Or worse," Lyra intervened, speaking for the first time in the formal meeting. All eyes turned to her as she continued without hesitation. "They could be accelerating experiments or exporting children to yet undiscovered facilities. That's what happened when there was a surprise inspection in Sonoma. They transferred 4 older children somewhere else overnight. We never found out where." The silence that followed her statement was heavy, laden with disturbing implications. Finally, Sarah, the former nurse from the facility who now worked as a wellness coordinator at the foundation, confirmed. "Lyra is right. There were established evacuation protocols. If they suspect they've been discovered, they will act quickly. The most valuable children will be relocated first." Robert stood up, walking to the window that offered a panoramic view of San Francisco. His mind rapidly processed the information, weighing risks and opportunities. "How much time do we have before an official operation can be mounted?" he asked O'Connell. The detective sighed. "For something international, involving formal cooperation between police forces, weeks at a minimum, possibly months considering the political complications." "We don't have weeks," Robert declared, turning back to the group. "Not according to Matt's drawings and Annie's feelings. Those children need help now. What are you suggesting?" Jacob asked, though his tone indicated he already knew the answer. "A preliminary private operation," Robert replied without hesitation. "Not for rescue, we don't have the resources for that, but to confirm, document, and collect irrefutable evidence that will accelerate the official process." "It's risky," O'Connell warned, "and legally questionable." "It's riskier to allow those children to be moved somewhere even more isolated," Robert countered. "I'm not talking about an armed invasion, just advanced reconnaissance." The discussion that followed was intense, with legitimate concerns raised about jurisdiction, security, and potential diplomatic complications. In the end, however, a pragmatic consensus prevailed. Jacob's team would conduct a discreet reconnaissance operation at the Mendoza property, limited to gathering evidence that could support a later official intervention. When the meeting finally ended and the participants dispersed, Robert found Lyra waiting for him in the hallway, her face marked by a familiar determination. "You're going in person, aren't you?" she asked directly. Robert hesitated only for a moment before nodding. "I need to see it with my own eyes, to confirm there are really children like you there." "Then I'm going with you," she declared, not as a request but as an established fact. "Lyra, it's too dangerous. I can't—" "It's not your choice," she interrupted with surprising firmness. "Those children are connected to Matt in some way. If he's feeling them, they're probably feeling him too. Someone who understands these connections needs to be there." Robert was preparing to argue when the library door opened and Matt emerged. his face extraordinarily serious. "She's right, Dad," he said, joining the conversation. "And there's more. The girl who's calling me, her name is Valentina. She can... It's hard to explain. But she can create illusions, make people see things that aren't there or not see things that are. How do you know that?" Robert asked, astonished. "She showed me in the dreams," Matt replied simply. "And she told me she's keeping everyone hidden, making the bad men think the cellar is empty, when there are actually 7 children there. But she's getting tired. She can't keep it up for much longer." Robert and Lyra exchanged alarmed looks. The situation was even more urgent than they had imagined. "I'm not asking to go," Matt clarified, surprising his father. "I know it would be too dangerous, but Lyra needs to go. She understands how these powers work, and, Robert prompted when his son hesitated. "And I promised Valentina we would send help," he completed, his eyes welling up. "She's so scared, Dad, they all are." At that moment, any remaining resistance from Robert dissolved. The connection between special children was a phenomenon they still didn't fully understand, but whose reality was becoming increasingly undeniable. 3 days, he declared finally. Discreet preparation, reconnaissance only. No direct intervention unless absolutely necessary. The operation was organized with impressive efficiency. Robert's private jet was ready for takeoff by the end of that same day. With a minimal but highly qualified team, Robert, Lyra, Jacob, and 2 of his most trusted men, plus Sarah, whose experience with special children could be invaluable. Leaving Matt and Annie behind was painful, especially with the boy clearly distressed by the responsibility he felt towards Valentina and the other Argentinian children. Mrs. Gable, ever practical, promised to keep the children occupied with a special gardening project on the roof, a distraction Annie particularly loved. "You'll be back soon, right?" the little girl asked, hugging Robert with surprising strength for her size. "Sooner than you think," he assured her, kissing the top of her head. "And we'll be in constant contact." The flight to Mendoza was smooth, allowing the team to refine their plan in detail. Sarah, who had developed a special bond with Lyra since the Sonoma rescue, worked with the teenager to prepare specific approaches for children with different types of gifts. "If this Valentina girl can really create illusions, we need to be very careful," Sarah warned. "Children with mental powers tend to be extremely defensive when threatened, sometimes not even realizing the difference between friends and enemies." "Matt said she trusts him," Lyra commented thoughtfully. "Maybe we can use that connection somehow." Robert, watching them work together, felt a mixture of pride and concern. In less than a year, Lyra had transformed from a frightened girl carrying her dying sister into a confident and articulate young woman, taking on responsibilities many adults would shy away from. It was simultaneously impressive and unsettling, a constant reminder of the circumstances that had forced her to mature prematurely. Upon their arrival in Mendoza, it was already night. A local contact of Jacob's, a former Argentinian police officer named Gabriel, now working as a private investigator, was waiting for them at the airport with discreet vehicles and updates on the target property. The Estancia Los Cipreses, as it's known locally, is about 40 kilometers from the city, Gabriel explained, as he drove along progressively more rural roads. Officially, it's a rehabilitation center for young people with special needs. Its operation is registered as a partnership between a Swiss educational foundation and an Argentinian health conglomerate. "Any clue who really controls the place?" Jacob asked. "The layers of companies are impressive," Gabriel replied with reluctant admiration, "but I managed to trace financial connections to a name you might recognize, the New Horizons Foundation." Robert felt a chill run down his spine. It was the same front foundation Ivan had used in the States, so it's definitely part of the same network, he concluded, exchanging significant looks with Lyra. "How close can we get without being detected?" Jacob asked, ever practical. Gabriel pointed to a spot on a digital map. "There's a rise about 1 kilometer from the main property. It offers a clear view of the complex, especially with the right equipment. The challenge will be the security system. Perimeter cameras, motion sensors in the surrounding areas, guards patrolling at regular intervals. Sounds like a prison." "Not a rehabilitation center," Sarah commented, with bitterness. "Exactly like in Sonoma," Lyra observed. looking out the window at the nocturnal landscape. Same methods, same facade, same excessive concern with security. The group set up a temporary base in a small inn nearby, owned by a trusted friend of Gabriel's. After a night of meticulous planning, they were ready for the first observation the next morning. Dawn found Robert, Jacob, Gabriel, and Lyra strategically positioned on the aforementioned rise, using state-of-the-art surveillance equipment to observe the estancia without being detected. Sarah remained at the inn, preparing medical and psychological supplies in case they made direct contact with the children. The property was strikingly similar to Matt's drawings, a main building in Spanish colonial style with characteristic red tile roofs, surrounded by smaller buildings that looked like labs or dormitories. In the background, the majestic Andes mountain range created a surreal contrast, so much natural beauty framing a place of exploitation and suffering. "The resemblance to the drawings is frightening," Jacob murmured, adjusting the focus of a long-range camera. How could the boy know so many details? The mental connection between special children seems to transcend physical boundaries, Robert replied, repeating explanations he had begun to accept as reality, however extraordinary they might be. Matt and this Valentina girl are somehow sharing perceptions. Over the next few hours, they methodically documented the estancia's routine: guard shift changes, vehicle arrivals and departures, movement of people between buildings. Particularly interesting was the smaller building to the right of the main structure, an annex with small, highly secured windows, where children occasionally appeared for what seemed to be a supervised recreation period in an inner courtyard. 7, Lyra counted, watching intently through advanced binoculars. Exactly as Matt said. 3 boys, 4 girls, ages between about 6 and 12. The most disturbing observation, however, came at midday, when a group of adults in formal attire arrived in 3 luxury cars. They were received with evident deference by what appeared to be the facility's director, and were led directly to the annex where the children were. "This looks like a demonstration," Gabriel commented with clear revulsion, "as if they're showing off the children." "Potential investors," Lyra confirmed with a coldness that barely masked her fury. "In Sonoma, they did the same. They forced us to demonstrate our gifts for rich people interested in funding the experiments. Or worse, in eventually acquiring the final product." The statement brought a horrified silence among the adults. Robert felt a wave of nausea, imagining Matt being treated as a commodity, paraded like a curiosity to satisfy the greed and morbid fascination of powerful, unscrupulous people. "We need more," he said finally, determination hardening his voice. "Photos and external observations won't be enough to trigger an immediate international intervention. We need concrete proof of what happens inside those buildings." "You're not suggesting," Jacob began, alarmed. "Limited infiltration," Robert confirmed. "Not a full invasion, just enough to get irrefutable evidence." "It's extremely risky," Gabriel warned. "The security is professional. Any attempt at unauthorized approach would likely result in a confrontation." "Not always," Lyra intervened, surprising everyone. "Not if they can't see us." All eyes turned to her, confused. "Valentina," she explained. "If Matt is right about her abilities, and if the connection between them is strong enough, maybe we can use that to our advantage." "How exactly?" Robert asked, intrigued. "We need Matt," Lyra replied simply. "Not physically here, but as a conductor. A mental intermediary between us and Valentina." The suggestion was so extraordinary that it initially met with skepticism, especially from Gabriel, who was not familiar with the full extent of the special children's abilities. But after Lyra discreetly demonstrated her own gift, instantly healing a cut on Jacob's arm that he had gotten earlier while passing through thorny bushes, the resistance subsided. Secure video call was established with the penthouse in San Francisco. Matt, clearly anxious but determined, listened intently to the plan. "I can try," he said after careful thought. "When I'm sleeping, the connection with Valentina is stronger. But I've never tried to direct specific messages." "It doesn't have to be elaborate," Lyra explained. "Just make her understand that we're here to help, and that we need her to use her gift to make us not exactly invisible but unnoticed, like she does with the children in the cellar." "I'll try tonight," Matt promised, "but I can't guarantee it will work." "We understand," Robert assured him, keeping his voice confident so as not to convey to his son the pressure they all felt. "Any help will be valuable." The night at the inn was tense, each team member processing the risks involved in their own way. For Robert, anxiety mixed with a renewed determination as he remembered the children observed in the courtyard, their restrained movements, their watchful gazes, so similar to the behavior Matt had exhibited in the first days after his rescue. Shortly after midnight, Robert's secure phone rang. It was Mrs. Gable, her usually calm voice now trembling slightly. "Mr. Monroe, the boy. He's in some kind of trance. I tried to wake him, but he's not responding. His eyes are open, but it's like he's not really here." "Don't try to wake him," Robert instructed, exchanging alarmed looks with Lyra, who was listening on the extension. "Just stay with him, keep him safe. I believe it's part of what we discussed earlier." After hanging up, Lyra explained, "He's in deep communication with Valentina. I've seen it happen between children with mental gifts in Sonoma. It's like a shared altered state of consciousness." "Is it dangerous for him?" Robert asked, paternal concern momentarily overriding all other considerations. "Not physically," Lyra assured him, "but it can be emotionally exhausting, especially if Valentina is under extreme stress." Before they could discuss further, the phone rang again. This time it was Annie, her voice small but firm. "Uncle Robert, Matt said to go to the back gate when the sun rises. Valentina will make the guards not see you, but it only works if you believe it too. Like a secret that everyone knows except the guards." The simplicity of the instruction, delivered with the unshakable confidence of a child, contrasted dramatically with the extraordinary thing it proposed. Robert exchanged looks with Jacob, whose skeptical expression was evident. "We can at least try," Robert argued. "If it doesn't work, we pull back and find another approach." The hours that followed were spent in meticulous preparation. Gabriel, still clearly uncomfortable with the supernatural aspects of the plan, insisted on developing a conventional contingency strategy: escape routes, alternative meeting points, emergency protocols. At dawn, Robert, Lyra, and Jacob positioned themselves discreetly near the service gate at the back of the property. Gabriel would remain in the observation post, monitoring the situation and ready to intervene if necessary. "Remember," Lyra whispered, as they waited for the exact moment Matt had indicated. "We have to believe completely. The illusion only works if we psychologically participate in it." Robert nodded, trying to open his mind to possibilities that a year ago he would have dismissed as absolutely impossible. If his journey with the special children had taught him anything, it was that the boundaries of reality were far more fluid than he had ever imagined. At 6:15 a.m. sharp, as Matt had indicated through Annie, a supply truck approached the gate. The guards came out of their booth for the routine inspection, and at that exact moment, Robert felt something extraordinary, a kind of vibration in the air, a slight tremor in perception, as if reality briefly rippled around them. "Now," Lyra murmured, advancing naturally towards the open gate. The most incredible thing happened. The guards looked directly at them, but their gazes slid over them like water on oil, without focus, without recognition. It was as if the trio were completely invisible, not because they weren't there, but because they were somehow irrelevant to the men's perception. They walked calmly through the gate, maintaining a natural and confident pace, as Lyra had instructed. "Furtive movements would draw attention," she had explained. "We have to act like we belong here, as if our presence is so common it's not even worth noticing." Once inside the perimeter, they moved quickly towards the annex where the children had been seen the day before. The building had electronic security, cameras and card readers on the doors, but strangely, the cameras seemed to turn away whenever they approached, and a side door was inexplicably ajar. "Valentina," Lyra whispered with admiration. "She's extraordinarily powerful." The interior of the building was clinically sterile: white corridors, fluorescent lights, sequentially numbered doors. Following Lyra's intuition, they headed towards the end of the main corridor, where a larger door led to a descending staircase. "The cellar," Robert murmured, remembering Matt's words. Descending carefully, they found another corridor, this one clearly older than the rest of the structure. Stone walls, dimmer lighting. an atmosphere more reminiscent of a dungeon than a medical facility. At the end of this corridor, a heavy metal door was surprisingly unlocked. Upon opening it, they were faced with a scene that simultaneously confirmed their worst fears and ignited hope. 7 children, of various ages, huddled in a space clearly not designed for human habitation, but which they had tried to make minimally comfortable with makeshift blankets and drawings taped to the damp walls. At the front of the group, protective and defiant, stood a girl of about 11, with dark hair framing a pale but determined face. Her eyes, an intense green, fixed immediately on Lyra. "You are Matt's friend," she said in Spanish, not as a question but as a confirmation. "He said you would come." "Valentina," Lyra replied in the same language, kneeling to be at the girl's level. "We're here to help. You've done an incredible job keeping everyone safe." The tension in the child's face softened slightly, but her eyes remained alert. "We can't leave now. They'll do an inspection in 30 minutes. If they find out we're gone—" "We didn't come for an immediate escape," Robert explained gently. "We came to gather evidence to ensure an official operation with full legal support." As he spoke, Jacob was already working discreetly, photographing the conditions of the cellar, collecting samples, methodically documenting what they found. "We mainly need information," Lyra continued. "Files, records of the experiments, anything that proves what they're doing here." Valentina exchanged glances with the other children before answering. "The main files are in the director's office, in the main building, but there's a computer terminal in the doctor's room, at the end of this corridor. They use it to update our records after the tests." The hesitation on the word tests spoke volumes about what these children regularly faced. "How long can you maintain the protection?" Robert asked, still marveling at the girl's ability. A flash of weariness crossed the young face. "Not much longer. I've been holding it for many hours, ever since Matt said you were coming. It's draining." Lyra moved closer, extending her hands. "I can help with that, if you'll let me." Valentina hesitated briefly before nodding. Lyra gently placed her hands on the girl's temples, closing her eyes in concentration. A soft, almost imperceptible glow seemed to emanate from the point of contact. When Lyra pulled back, Valentina looked visibly refreshed, her eyes brighter, her posture firmer. "How did you—" she began, astonished. "We each have our gifts," Lyra replied with a small smile. "Mine is sharing energy." Robert, watching the interaction, felt an overwhelming emotion. Pride in Lyra's maturity and compassion, renewed determination, seeing the children who desperately needed help, and deep gratitude for the extraordinary path that had brought him to this moment. "Let's go to the terminal," Jacob decided, checking his watch. "We have about 20 minutes before the inspection." With Valentina leading, they quickly located the mentioned room. A small medical office with basic examination equipment and, crucially, a computer connected to the internal system. Jacob, with impressive technical skills, quickly bypassed the basic security and began extracting and copying files to a portable device. "This is gold," he murmured as the data flowed. Complete records of the experiments, detailed profiles of the children, internal correspondence explicitly discussing the market value of different abilities. Exactly what we need to force an immediate official intervention. While Jacob worked, Robert and Lyra spoke in low voices with Valentina and the other children, gathering information about their routines, the types of experiments conducted, the researchers involved. Every shared detail reinforced the urgency of their mission and the need for a comprehensive and definitive response. "Done," Jacob finally announced. "We have everything we need and then some." At the same instant, Valentina stiffened, her eyes momentarily losing focus. "Someone's coming," she warned. "Sooner than expected." "Can we go back the way we came?" Robert asked, already calculating alternative routes. The girl shook her head. "They're coming from that direction. We'll have to use the emergency exit through the labs." With no time for lengthy deliberations, they followed Valentina down another corridor, this one leading to a series of rooms with advanced medical and scientific equipment. What they saw in these rooms, neural monitoring machines, containment devices modified for children, detailed notes on pain thresholds and maximum stimulation, only reinforced the urgency of their mission. The emergency exit, as Valentina had indicated, led to a secondary parking area, partially hidden by vegetation. The challenge would be to cross this open space to the cover of the woods beyond without being detected. "I can do it," Valentina assured them, though lines of tension were beginning to appear around her eyes. "But I need you to stay very close to me. The greater the distance, the harder it is to maintain the illusion." Forming a tight group around the girl, they advanced through the exposed parking lot. Robert could feel the intensity of Valentina's mental effort, an almost physical pressure in the air around them. They were just a few meters from the tree line when an alarm echoed through the complex. "They found out," Valentina murmured, her voice tense with effort. "They realized the terminal was accessed." "Keep walking normally," Lyra instructed. "Any sudden change will draw more attention." Maintaining an outward calm despite their racing hearts, the group continued to advance methodically. When they finally reached the cover of the trees, Valentina staggered slightly, the effort clearly taking its toll. "We need to take her with us," Lyra declared as Jacob contacted Gabriel on the radio, requesting immediate extraction. "I can't leave the others," Valentina protested, though exhaustion was evident in her voice. "I promised to protect them." "And you did," Robert assured her, kneeling before her. "But now we have the evidence we need to save them for good. In a few days, an official operation will come to rescue them, all of them. In the meantime, you'll be a target," Lyra completed gently. "They'll know you helped us. It won't be safe for you to stay." The girl hesitated, the conflict evident on her young face, the desire to remain loyal to the other children, battling against the rational understanding of the situation. "Matt says you should come," Lyra said, surprising everyone. When Robert looked at her questioningly, she explained, "I don't know how, but I can feel him through her. It's like their connection somehow includes me, too." This last statement seemed to finally convince Valentina. With one last look at the facility where she had spent the last 2 years, she reluctantly nodded. "Will they be okay for a few days?" Robert asked, as they moved quickly through the woods towards the rendezvous point with Gabriel. "Yes," Valentina confirmed. "The others look after each other. And I left a permanent illusion on the guards. They'll see all the children during head counts, even if one is missing." Robert's admiration for the resilience and ingenuity of these children grew with every moment. In conditions that would break many adults, they had developed remarkably effective systems of mutual support and survival strategies. Gabriel was waiting at the arranged spot, engine already running, his expression tense from monitoring the alarm on the security radio. His surprise at seeing Valentina was momentary, quickly replaced by a pragmatic understanding of the situation. "The inn isn't safe now," he declared, as he drove quickly along back roads. "We're going straight to the airport. The jet is ready as per the contingency plan." The return to San Francisco was both triumphant and tense. The evidence collected was irrefutable and devastating, enough not only to secure the immediate rescue of the children in Mendoza, but potentially to dismantle a significant portion of the international network. Valentina, exhausted beyond comprehension after the prolonged mental effort, slept for most of the flight, waking only briefly to accept water and light food offered by Sarah, who monitored her closely. "She used her gift beyond any reasonable limit," Sarah explained to Robert, as they watched the girl sleeping peacefully. "She'll need days, maybe weeks, to recover completely." "She'll have all the time she needs," Robert assured her, "and all the support we can offer." Upon their arrival at the penthouse in San Francisco, a moving scene awaited them. Matt, apparently recovered from his own strenuous trance, ran to the door as soon as he heard the elevator, with Annie right behind him. When Valentina emerged, leaning on Lyra, the boy's eyes lit up with immediate recognition. "Valentina," he said, approaching cautiously as if afraid she were just an illusion. "Matt," she replied, an exhausted but genuine smile lighting up her face. "It's strange to see you in person, after so much time talking only in dreams." The moment of connection between the two children was palpable, a mutual recognition that transcended physical and linguistic barriers. There was the beginning of something significant, not just a friendship, but a shared understanding of experiences that few in the world could truly comprehend. In the following days, as O'Connell mobilized an international operation based on the collected evidence, The Munro penthouse adjusted to accommodate its newest resident. Valentina, initially reserved with the adults but immediately at ease with the other children, slowly began to relax, allowing herself moments of genuine childhood joy, something that had clearly been denied to her for a long time. On one particularly significant evening, 2 weeks after their return from Mendoza, Robert found the 4 children on the balcony, watching the stars. Unnoticed at first, he witnessed something extraordinary. Matt, concentrating, made small objects float in the air. Lyra, with a gentle touch, healed a scratch on Annie's arm. The little girl, in turn, described with impressive accuracy the location of distant ships on the unseen horizon. Aunt Valentina, smiling serenely, created tiny illusions, luminous butterflies that seemed to dance among the real stars. It was a scene of transcendent beauty, extraordinary children sharing their gifts in an environment of absolute acceptance and safety, without fear, without pressure, without exploitation. "This is how it should be," Lyra said, finally noticing Robert's presence. "Our gifts celebrated, not feared or exploited." Robert nodded, too moved to reply immediately. Finally, finding his voice, he said, "And this is how it will be, for you and for all the other children we find." A week later, the news arrived. The international operation in Mendoza had been a complete success. All 6 remaining children were rescued safely. The facility was shut down, and 17 people were arrested, including researchers, guards, and significantly, 3 high-profile investors, a Swiss banker, an Argentinian pharmaceutical executive, and a regional politician with national aspirations. More importantly, the seized files revealed connections to similar facilities in at least 5 other countries. The network was being exposed and dismantled on a scale that not even Robert had imagined possible when he began his solitary search for Matt. On a quiet afternoon, while the children played under Mrs. Gable's watchful eye, Robert found himself reflecting on the extraordinary journey of the past 12 months. From a broken man, confined to a wheelchair and consumed by bitterness, he had transformed into someone with a renewed purpose, recovered mobility, and a family that defied all conventional definitions. "What are you thinking about?" Lyra asked, joining him on the balcony. Gradually, the girl was shedding her constant seriousness, allowing herself moments of spontaneous curiosity and even occasional playfulness, signs of emotional healing as significant as any physical recovery she had facilitated. "About miracles," he replied, simply. "About how life can change completely when you least expect it." Lyra smiled, a genuine smile that lit up her entire face. "Do you know what Valentina told me yesterday? That in all the possible futures she could glimpse during her captivity, she never imagined one where she would be safe, happy, and loved." The word loved hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. These children, Matt, Lyra, Annie, and now Valentina, had become much more than protégés or responsibilities. They were his family in the deepest and truest sense. "There are more children out there," Lyra continued, looking towards the horizon. "Children like us, scared, confused about their gifts, vulnerable to exploitation. And we will find them," Robert assured her, with absolute conviction. "One by one, if necessary." At that moment, watching the children play on the balcony, Matt and Valentina challenging each other in a board game where pieces occasionally moved on their own, Annie giggling as she chased butterflies that existed only in the shared perception created by Valentina, Robert felt a profound certainty. The real miracle had never been regaining his movement or even finding his son. The real miracle had been rediscovering his own humanity through these extraordinary children, who taught him that the most powerful gifts were not those that defied the laws of physics, but those that transformed lives, compassion, courage, and the infinite capacity of the human heart to expand to include new loves, new responsibilities, new beginnings. And in a world where such miracles were possible, there was no limit to what they could achieve together. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Robert and the special children has touched your hearts deeply. To follow this emotional journey of overcoming family and extraordinary powers, we have prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories. Find it here by clicking on the left. If you were moved by this narrative, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like the video so we can continue bringing stories that inspire and move you. Every day we share unique narratives that explore the complexity of life and the bonds that unite us. We want to get to know you too. Tell us in the comments what part of the country you're watching from, and which character touched your heart the most in this story. Until our next adventure together,